"You're just Decor," he said like he was complimenting a throw pillow. That's how the CFO sent me packing. 12 years of blood, spreadsheets, and weekends eaten alive by budget meetings, reduced to a punchline in a $900 chair. The whole boardroom laughed. They actually laughed. One guy even sipped his espresso like we were at open mic night and I was the act. I didn't cry, didn't scream, just stared at the end of quarter slide on the projector while HR handed me my folder like it came with fries and a Coke. He called it streamlining, said my role was non-essential. I ran payroll, reconciled vendor contracts, flagged financial inconsistencies for 5 separate audits. But sure, I was just corporate wallpaper. By the way, 97% of people who hear these stories never hit subscribe. Wild, right? If you're one of the rare ones still reading and breathing, toss a like and click that button. It's free, unlike my therapy sessions. It seriously helps the team keep going while we peel back layers of corporate garbage like an onion soaked in expired toner. Anyway, I took the folder, smiled, and in that exact moment, while everyone around the table went back to pretending they weren't 3 bad decisions from eating lunch in a parking lot, I made a decision. Not to fight. Not yet, to wait. You see, you don't spend 12 years in finance without learning 2 things: where the bodies are buried and how to quietly rent a shovel. I'd seen the adjustments, the ones that didn't add up. Vendor payments with no matching contracts, consulting fees routed through shell accounts, an offshore transfer disguised as a one-time Christmas bonus, except it was July, and the recipient's name was the same as our CFO's college roommate. And the best part, I'd flagged every one of those anomalies, documented them, backed them up. Not because I expected a gold star, but because I stopped believing in clean ledgers about 3 CFOs ago. I wasn't just Decor. I was the wallpaper that watched everything. So I walked out with my cardboard box, my dignity duct taped to the side, and one little USB drive tucked behind a photo of me at the holiday party. Smile fake, eyes screaming. That USB was the real severance package. It held 12 years of dirt. Ledger entries, audit trails, encrypted memos, and a folder labeled for when the house burns down. Because I knew it would. And what no one in that room knew, what he didn't know, was that my brother works at the DOJ. Not in the mailroom, not as some intern fetching lattes, but as a senior federal investigator with a neck for smelling financial rot before the rest of the house collapses. I never told anyone, not because I was hiding it, but because in places like that boardroom, power only listens when you speak its language. And sometimes silence is the loudest threat. So while they toasted their efficiency with catered sliders and half-hearted claps, I drove home, opened a beer, and slid that USB into a drive marked gardening tips. And just like that, a plan was born, not out of vengeance, out of principle, out of rage wearing a suit. Let the CFO have his moment. Let him smile and smirk and pretend he'd won. I was done decorating. Now, I was redecorating the crime scene. The next morning felt like walking into my own funeral, only I had to pack up the casket myself. HR met me at my desk, clipboard in hand, overly cheerful, like they were guiding a toddler through their first dentist visit. "We're so sorry," she chirped, already eyeing the monitor like she was wondering if she'd get my dual screens. "But hey, silver lining, you finally get some free time?" "Yeah, nothing says fun employment like getting booted because a smug little spreadsheet sociopath thinks Excel macros are a personality." I shoved my ceramic mug into the box. The one that said this might be vodka, a joke at first, a prophecy by year 8. My stapler. A faded desk plant. 12 years. It all fit in one cardboard box. Neat, tidy, like they'd vacuum up the air I breathed before noon. The floor felt colder walking out than it ever did on the way in. Colleagues peeked over cubicles like I had something contagious. A few muttered sorry without meeting my eyes, but the real sting came from the silence, his silence. The CFO didn't even pretend to be busy. Just nodded like I was a staff meeting that went long. But as I walked out, I didn't feel empty. Not exactly. Because my mind was replaying every red flag I ever buried. Like the time we issued a $480,000 consulting fee to a vendor called Turnkey Optimizations LLC, which had no address, no phone number, and whose invoice was written in Comic Sans. Comic Sans, or that stretch during Q3 last year when a series of duplicate payment corrections were logged, except none of the duplicates existed in the first place. The payments did, the reversals didn't. Then there was that mystery fund transfer we were asked not to question, $500,000 from the corporate reserve sent to a PayPal address with the name blacked out. And guess who had the paper trail? Guess who quietly exported the ledger after every closeout, flagged transactions, printed memos, and kept physical copies just in case the server fails? I did. Not because I thought I'd need them, but because my gut never stopped tapping on the glass. Because people like him, the grinning CFO with his dumb, shiny cufflinks and his finance is storytelling speeches, they always think they're the smartest guy in the room. But numbers don't care about charisma. And I'd kept the receipts. Every time I was told, don't worry about that, or just file it under vendor marketing, or we're pivoting, don't overthink the numbers, I quietly made a copy, backed it up, labeled it something innocuous like Q4 snacks analysis. I wasn't looking for a smoking gun. I was building an arsenal. And as I sat in my car, box on the passenger seat, my name badge still warm from the printer ink they'd just deactivated, I opened the cloud folder I never told anyone about. It was all there, 12 years of beautiful, terrifying truth. And in that moment, something shifted. Humiliation faded like background noise after a train passes. I didn't feel sad. I felt ready. This wasn't a breakup, it was premeditation. Because they didn't just fire the only person who knew how to balance the budget. They fired the only person who knew where every dollar had been buried, who put it there, and who signed their name beside it. I didn't need revenge. I had the numbers. We met at the kind of diner that smells like burnt toast and old secrets. Our family's unofficial safe house for awkward birthdays, divorce announcements, and now, apparently, federal detonations. My brother was already there when I walked in, nursing a black coffee like it had wronged him personally. Same flannel, same stare that could make grown men confess to sins they hadn't committed. Been a while, he said, no smile, just a tilt of the head. That's love in our family, eye contact, and a refill. I slid into the booth, reached into my bag, and placed the USB between the salt shaker and a bottle of ketchup that probably predated the internet. Off the record, I said. He didn't touch it. Just looked at me, then the drive, then back again. You know this isn't small potatoes, right? That's why I brought it, I said, keeping my voice low. And because you're the only person I trust to not bury it in red tape. He finally picked it up, one of those slow, deliberate movements that made me nervous even though I knew what was on it. You encrypt it twice. Metadata scrubbed? Yes. He nodded like a priest listening to a confession he already knew by heart. How far does it go? I took a breath, staring at the Formica table, suddenly remembering the sound my old office door made when it clicked shut. Far, years of off-book transfers, internal payments to shell vendors, contract splits, reversals that never reversed, and patterns. End of patterns? He asked, though I could already see he was mentally assembling a flowchart of indictments. End of quarter spikes, all pointing to the same 3 accounts. And 2 of them traced back to a private equity firm with the same mailing address as our CFO's vacation home. He whistled just once, low, no words. That's when I felt the quiet thrill I hadn't let myself touch before. The knowing that I'd finally lit a fuse on something that couldn't be ignored, couldn't be laughed off in a boardroom by a man in loafers worth more than my first car. He didn't ask how I got the files. Didn't need to. We grew up learning to be quiet in loud rooms. Is your name on anything? He finally asked. No. And I left before they could make me sign a severance NDA. They tried. I stalled. Walked out with nothing but a box and a backup drive. He sipped his coffee. Smart. You'll keep it discreet. He gave me a look that said, I taught you how to be discreet. Then he dropped the USB into a sealed evidence pouch from his coat pocket like he came expecting this exact moment. The waitress came by with the check. He paid in cash. As we stood to leave, he said, this won't stay quiet for long. But when it cracks open, it's going to be loud. Might get messy? I nodded. I'm okay with messy. Just not quiet anymore. He didn't hug me. Just touched my shoulder once and walked out, already dialing someone on a burner I didn't recognize. I sat there a minute longer, heart calm, brain humming. That little flash drive, it wasn't a weapon. It was an invitation to audit, to investigate, to drag the roaches out from the cracks they thought I'd never reach. And the best part, I didn't need to spin a story. I had the truth, line by line, transaction by transaction. And now he had it too, back home. I went full suburban zen. Garden gloves, knee pads, and a shovel I usually only used for planting tomatoes. The backyard had never looked so alive. Every rosebush trimmed just right, every weed pulled like it personally insulted me. Funny how rage can turn into landscaping. But inside, I was a dam holding back a flood. I kept it light. Ran errands, bought groceries like I hadn't just handed the federal government a grenade with a golden pin, chatted with my neighbor about mulch and squirrels, smiled at the barista like I didn't have encrypted backups of the CFO's dirty laundry sitting behind a fake wallpaper folder on my laptop. You learn, in jobs like mine, how to wear silence like armor. That talent didn't vanish with a layoff. If anything, it got sharper. I wasn't waiting for justice. That's a fantasy people cling to when they've still got time to be naive. No, I was waiting for noise. The kind of noise you only hear when something that's rotted from the inside finally splits open. And then the whispers started. First came a LinkedIn message from a former coworker. No greeting, no emoji. Just, hey, are you hearing what I'm hearing? Then another. Someone's asking for access logs from Q4. Thought you might have stirred something? I replied to neither. Just archived them. Quiet proof the ripples were spreading. Then a guy I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Used to run compliance until they quietly restructured him out. Sent me a cryptic email. Nice weather lately. But internal audit doesn't just pop in during Q1 unless something smells. Bingo. I checked some old internal dashboards I still had read-only access to. They never revoked my dummy login, classic oversight. Buried in a service queue ticket, review of non-standard vendor payment structures urgent. Timestamp 3 days after I handed off the drive. Coincidence? Sure, and Elvis works at my DMV. The silence from corporate leadership told me everything I needed to know. See, they weren't denying anything publicly. Not yet. which meant they hadn't figured out where the leak started or how deep it went. That's the kind of paranoia that makes bad people do stupid things. I imagined the CFO pacing in his office, staring at old spreadsheets, wondering which decorative employee had kept the receipts. I knew DOJ involvement wouldn't stop with him. This was institutional. Rotten roots, not just a bad branch. If this thing blew open in full view, it wouldn't just be one headline, it'd be a buffet of perp walks, one greasy executive after another. Back in the garden, I dug a hole for new hydrangea. Cold sweat on my back, dirt under my nails, a faint smile on my face, because it was happening. And the best part? No one could trace a single breadcrumb back to me. I hadn't emailed anything, hadn't posted, hadn't said a word to anyone who wasn't blood. I just watched and waited, like the only person at a dinner party who knows there's a gas leak. Because when the lights start flickering and the walls begin to shake, they'll all look around, panicked, confused, but I'll already be outside. It started with a ping. A routine audit request slid into the company's inbox, wrapped in formal language and thinly veiled fire. The kind of email that pretends it's business as usual, but every sentence hums like it's holding a knife behind its back. I still had access to a shared inbox from my day's running point on vendor inquiries. Technically, it should have been deactivated. But like most things in that office, security was a suggestion. Subject line, follow up, financial compliance clarification request urgent normal words. Abnormal tone. And then the body, please provide full access to all off-ledger activity, including but not limited to non-standard vendor contracts, interdepartmental reallocations, and any temporary consulting engagements over $100,000 USD from the past 7 years. 7 years. That's not an audit, that's a siege. I didn't smile. Not yet. I needed to read it twice to believe the hammer had actually dropped, but it had clean and surgical. The language was pure DOJ, polite enough for plausible deniability, sharp enough to make every C-suite executive sweat through their tailored shirts. And the kicker? The signature at the bottom, Office of the Inspector General, DOJ Financial Crimes Division. No name, just the office. But I recognized the file routing number. My brother's team. He hadn't texted, hadn't called, nothing. We both knew better. He was in play now and I was radioactive. But the moment I saw that number, I knew the investigation wasn't hypothetical anymore. It wasn't brewing, it was operational. Somewhere inside that building, inboxes were lighting up, Slack channels going silent, old emails being quietly deleted, files moved into password-protected folders labeled personal like that ever fooled anyone. And somewhere, CFO was panicking. Because the next domino hit the table, he started calling people. Not me, obviously, I was poison, but other former staff. Maggie, who left last year after calling him a budget-cutting weasel during happy hour. Lewis, who got shuffled out of finance for team fit issues, but used to handle the Q4 reconciliation I flagged 2 years back. They both messaged me the same day, separately with eerily similar wording. Hey, got a weird call from your old boss. Asking questions about past budget decisions. Playing nice, too nice. He was fishing, not for answers, for loyalty, trying to plug a leak with duct tape and charm. But the ship was already taking on water. He knew someone had the goods. What he didn't know was who, and that's where the beauty lived. Because if there's one thing worse than being investigated, it's not knowing why or by whom. That's what keeps people up at night. That's what makes them crack. He was spiraling, calling, poking, guessing. And the longer he guessed, the more time my brother's team had to follow the paper trail I'd built brick by brick, false invoice by false invoice. I imagined the CFO lying awake, replaying every shady approval, every late-night vendor consultation, trying to remember who else was in the room. And I imagined my files, quietly passed from analyst to analyst in some windowless DOJ war room, laying the whole operation bare. I didn't need front row seats. I already knew the ending. The hook was set. The line was taut, and all I had to do was hold steady while the truth did its work. It came at 11:42 p.m., an encrypted Proton Mail message, no subject line, no greeting, just 6 words sitting there like a heart attack in a snowstorm. They found it, the off-book ledger. I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds, not blinking, not breathing, just absorbing the seismic weight of it. They found it. Not there looking for it, not someone's suspects. They found it. I didn't need to ask who they were. It was my brother's team, no question. And I didn't need to ask what they found. I knew exactly which ledger he meant, because I named it. Buried in the company's file archive, inside a benign-looking folder labeled Q1 Vendor Reconciliation Backlog Final, sat a spreadsheet that was anything but. Hidden tabs, protected cells. A master key of every shady transaction I'd flagged but never spoken about. Created during the first year, I realized the books didn't balance and the truth had a body count. That file was never supposed to see daylight, and now it was sunlight's problem. I sat back in my chair and listened to the silence of my house, refrigerator hum, dog breathing, wind rattling the cheap blinds, and imagined the other sounds. Ones I knew were happening on the 17th floor back at corporate HQ, the CFO barking into his cell at 2 a.m., demanding someone get ahead of this. The legal team scrambling to draft plausible denials faster than their printer could spit out toner. The IT department digging through access logs, trying to trace who opened what and when, unaware I'd scrubbed my fingerprints clean months ago. The junior accountant who messaged me, God bless her, probably locked in a conference room with two VPs and an outside consultant who used to work for Enron. I didn't respond. She didn't expect me to. It was a flare shot into the sky. A signal, confirmation, the panic had begun. My neighbor's porch light clicked on across the street. Nothing dramatic, just a motion sensor catching a raccoon or a leaf. But it jolted me back to the moment, the surreal stillness of my own living room while the world I used to occupy spun itself into chaos. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. What I felt was surgical, not cold, just precise, like setting a bone that had been broken for too long. Let them have their panic. Let the fire drills run until their coffee turned to blood. They never saw me coming because they never saw me. I was just decor, remember? Now the wallpaper was peeling back to show the rot underneath. I pictured the CFO in his corner office, alone, sleeves rolled, tie off, hair disheveled, not because he was working late, but because he had to. Every shadow on the ledger traced back to his desk. Every ghost transaction had his signature, directly or by delegation. He thought he was a puppet master. But the strings had names, dates, vendor codes, and a backup file called for DOJ sitting in a secure Dropbox in Washington. And now he knew. He didn't know it was me. Not yet, but the shape of his terror would start to form a face soon. Not tonight, but soon. And when his phone finally lights up with my name, he won't be smirking. He'll be shaking. It was just after 6 a.m. when my phone lit up. Blocked number, but I knew. Don't forget the number of the man who calls you Decor while surgically removing your livelihood like it's plaque on his quarterly report. I let it ring twice. Then three, picked up on the fourth, didn't say a word. What did you do? His voice cracked like a windshield hit with a hammer. No hello, no greeting. Just raw, unfiltered panic barely strung together by syllables. I said nothing. The silence hit him harder than any answer could. You, he stuttered, caught himself. Tried again? They're tearing through our systems. Auditors. Legal, I've got DOJ inquiries landing in my inbox like spam. I took a sip of coffee, still silent. They have files, damn it. Ledgers we haven't touched in years. Vendor codes that no one was supposed to see. His breath was ragged like he'd been running. And you were the only one who he stopped. Because that was it. That was the moment the gears in his head clicked into place. The only person who ever flagged those discrepancies. The only one who didn't laugh during those boardroom jokes. The only one who never needed credit because I already had the truth. I trusted you, he spat, desperation now dripping with self-pity. You were part of the team, you had a seat at the table. I actually laughed just once, dry and quiet. A laugh meant for me, not him. I didn't speak, still, not one word. The silence twisted the knife. This is insane. He continued, voice unraveling thread by thread. You don't know what you've done, you've compromised everything. You think this helps you? This buries everyone. I leaned back in my chair, letting the early morning light spill through the blinds. I could hear birds outside, peaceful contrast to the slow collapse happening at his end of the line. This is federal, he whispered, like he was just now realizing it wasn't a bad dream. This isn't a slap on the wrist. This is careers, lives. Do you understand that? Still nothing from me, not even a breath, and that's when his voice changed. Not angry anymore, not righteous. Scared, please, he said, a single, pathetic syllable. Tell me what they know. But I wasn't here to comfort him. This wasn't a confession booth. This was the quiet before the concrete sets. He had finally reached the cliff's edge, and I hadn't laid a single hand on him. I'd let the truth drag him there all by itself. He filled the silence again. If you help me, maybe we can fix this. I can spin it, say it was oversight, say we inherited the mess. That's what he thought this was, spin, PR, a glitch in optics. He still didn't understand that the walls weren't cracking. They were gone. I could almost hear him pacing. His breathing quickened, and then softer, more uncertain than I'd ever heard from him. Are you there? Oh, I was. I just wanted him to marinate in it. Let the dread settle like wet concrete in his lungs. Let him feel the weight of all those years he thought no one was watching. I hadn't said a word, didn't need to, because sometimes silence is the loudest confession. And his panic, that was music. He called again 3 hours later. This time, I answered on the first ring, just to make sure he knew I chose when to listen. His voice came on slower now, trying to imitate calm, but it cracked at the edges like a mask left in the sun too long. Okay. Okay, listen, he started, like we were teammates sorting out a little misunderstanding. I may have overreacted earlier, got a little emotional. This whole thing, it's a mess, yes, but not unfixable. Unfixable, like this was a spilled latte on his balance sheet. I've spoken to legal, he said, and there's still room here. We control the narrative if we act fast, if we get ahead of it. Look, I know you had access to a lot of things. Maybe you misunderstood what you saw. There it was. Gaslight mode activated. Those files, he said, were complex. Context matters, you know that. I let the silence stretch just enough to let him sweat, then offered him 2 syllables, do I? It hit like a taser. He backpedaled so fast I could practically hear his loafers squeaking. No, I mean yes, of course you do. That's why I need you. We need to clarify this together. If you can reach out to your contacts, maybe we can shut this down before it spirals. There it was again. He kept saying we like we were still in the same trench, side by side, ducking mortar fire. Except he was the one dropping the bombs. Maybe someone got to the files, he said. Maggie? Lewis? You know how sloppy he was with permissions. Maybe he leaked something and they pinned it on you. You don't want to go down for something you didn't do. The irony almost made me laugh. Go down? I wasn't going down. I was holding the rope. Then came the desperation in its final, writhing form. Look, you help me clean this up. I can make it right. I'll tell the board it was a miscommunication. You'll have a job again, better pay. I'll backdate it, say you were consulting the whole time. Consulting? Right. That's what he called hush money in a turtleneck. He was reaching, clawing at anything that looked like leverage, trying every play in the narcissist playbook. Then silence just for a second, and when he spoke again, the voice was different, shaken, hollow. Why is your brother from the DOJ in my lobby? Oh, there it is, there it is. No more bluffing, no more bargaining. He finally saw the gun on the table. My satisfaction was instant but quiet, cold and clean. I didn't rush my answer. Let the pause sit between us like a ticking clock. I could hear him breathing, short, shallow, like he just realized the air had weight to it. The man who once bragged to interns about controlling narratives now sounded like a deer watching the headlights grow. You never said anything, he whispered. 12 years and you never said a goddamn thing. That was the beauty of it. I didn't need to say anything. I just needed him to look up from his empire of fraud and see my brother's badge across the marble lobby. Not a metaphor, not a threat. Just a fact, walking, breathing. Federal, I said one thing before hanging up. One last little truth, I watched everything. Click, I didn't answer his question, didn't offer clarity, didn't soften the blow, I just hung up. Let the silence finish what I started. From that moment forward, there was nothing left for me to say. No more warnings, no more slow unraveling. The fuse was gone. The charge had detonated. Now it was just smoke, debris, and consequences. I pictured it exactly how it happened, because I knew my brother too well. Knew the choreography of justice when it walked in wearing a government badge and a bulletproof comm. He wouldn't kick the door open or bark orders. That wasn't his style. He'd walk past security like he'd been invited to the damn ribbon cutting. One hand in his coat pocket, the other casually flashing his credentials like a VIP pass to the world's most overdue reckoning. Security wouldn't stop him. They'd nod, wave him through. And the CFO would already be in the lobby, exactly where he'd been told to wait. Suit rumpled, tie crooked, hair mussed in that particular way that says I haven't slept in 2 days and regret every decision since 2014. The man who once stood in front of the boardroom calling people like me non-essential now sat on an uncomfortable couch clutching a manila folder like it was life support. Inside that folder, his version of events. Excuses, redirects, whatever half-baked damage control he thought would save him. But the moment he saw the DOJ badge, not a letter, not a phone call, the badge, he would feel it in his chest, in his teeth, in his spine. That cold snap of understanding. That click in the back of the brain when the body realizes there is no escape hatch. I imagined his eyes twitching toward the exit, not running but thinking about it. That half-second fantasy where you bolt, where you slip through the door and become someone else in another state. Where you dye your hair, change your name, sell sunscreen in Arizona. But he didn't move, because there's a moment, just one, when a man understands the math of his own destruction. He knew it was over. Knew that folder in his hands wasn't a parachute, it was dead weight. My brother didn't stop to introduce himself. Didn't offer a handshake. He just walked past the front desk and into the elevator. Elevator closed, lobby stayed still, and the CFO, he stayed frozen, right there on that couch, finally silent. Exactly where I left him. Exactly where he belonged. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.